is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in-depth into my start or sit decisions for the quarterbacks of week number 4. Inside today's video, I'll be going in-depth into every single matchup, and I'll be telling you guys whether I believe you should start or sit the quarterbacks in every single game. But before we could get on into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. And if you do want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at Notorious FNTSY. I would also like to ask if you guys have any questions about week number 4, to please make sure that you ask down below in the comment section. I would really appreciate that. I love talking to you guys down there. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 4 quarterback start or sit decisions. We begin with Thursday Night Football, the Miami Dolphins at the Cincinnati Bengals. In this game, I like both of these starting quarterbacks. Tua Tagovailoa went into a game last week up against the Buffalo Bills, where a majority of fans believed that was going to be a back and forth affair between two of the better offenses in the NFL, in the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. But the game turned out to be a very one-sided game in terms of time of possession. The Buffalo Bills had so much time on offense, and while the Dolphins capitalized when they did get a chance to be on offense, they just didn't have the ball for long enough for it to be a back and forth game, and that was the game plan for the Buffalo Bills. That was to take a lot of time of possession. Thus, Tua has just a so-so game. He probably screwed you over if you started him in your fantasy football lineup, especially if you were expecting a fireworks show like we saw in the Dolphins versus the Baltimore Ravens. But this week, I expect a bounce-back spot for Tua Tagovailoa. Ultimately, I don't think this will be a very high-scoring game, but it does have the upside to be that when you have two of the better offenses in the NFL with the Bengals and the Miami Dolphins. So you definitely want to be starting Tua, especially with guys like Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill on their team, or on his team, I should say. Tyreek Hill and Tua have both called out Eli Apple, so this is going to be a very interesting game. Joe Burrow, Joe Shiesty, obviously you're going to be wanting to start him every single game of the season. The Dolphins defense is definitely tough, but I still think that Joe Burrow is able to ultimately get it done and finish as a top 10 quarterback. I have Joe Burrow in the top 10 quarterback range. Tua Tagovailoa will be closer to quarterback number 12, but I definitely like them both, and I believe they are both ideal starts on the week. These aren't fringe starters, like where you could almost talk yourself into starting someone who I might have listed as a sit. Both of these guys are confidently in my lineup. Next up, we move to the London game, the Minnesota Vikings at the New Orleans Saints. Now, I had a debate, the devil versus the angel on my shoulder, on Kirk Cousins in this matchup, because normally Kirk Cousins sucks absolute ass in primetime. We saw it in week number 2 up against the Philadelphia Eagles, and we have seen it for years. Kirk Cousins is way worse in primetime compared to 1 o'clock. Maybe it's past his bedtime or some shit. I have no idea, but he never performs in primetime. So I started to think, hey, Nick, is this a primetime game or not? And then, after some quick Googling, I realized that while this game is 9:15 a.m. in the United States, obviously it's going to take place later in the UK, in England, and the game starts at 2:15 time in England. So, that's perfect for Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is awesome when it's not 8 o'clock at night. He's awesome at 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock. Once it gets a little bit later, he starts getting a little bit sleepy. So I won't consider this a primetime game. I think Kirk Cousins has a field day up against the New Orleans Saints. The Saints defense is definitely solid, but Kirk Cousins bounced back in week 3, and I expect him to be solid going forward. A very reliable and safe start every single week. Famous Jameis Eat W. Winston is coming off of an injury from week number 2. He was banged up in week number 3, played not so hot in week number 3. In week number 4 here, he gets the Minnesota Vikings. He is said to play in this game. I have read that he is going to be good to go, so I'm going to play him. But Jameis Winston is on the very fringe of being a sit. In these videos, I talk about the top 18 quarterbacks as starts, because those are the guys that I think you can start and actually be fine with starting. Jameis is very close to being quarterback number 18, and if there is a quarterback later that I talk about as a sit that I also kind of like, you might want to start them over Jameis. Again, I'm comfortable with Jameis. I have Jameis in my starting lineup in one of my fantasy football leagues, so I'm fine playing Jameis, but again, he's not the most ideal of starting quarterbacks on the week. Next up, we move to the Cleveland Browns at the Atlanta Falcons, back on into the United States for the 1 p.m. slate here, Eastern Standard Time. The Cleveland Browns at the Atlanta Falcons. Jacoby Brissett undeniably looked great on Thursday Night Football up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I'm not here to throw stones at Jacoby Brissett, because when a guy that I have shit on for a while, especially in Miami, Jacoby Brissett, was soft as baby shit. The guy was awful. He really showed a lot up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. This matchup could be high scoring. But at the end of the day, when I'm trying to determine which quarterback I actually like in this matchup, I like Marcus Mariota a lot more. Marcus Mariota doesn't necessarily have a guy like Nick Chubb on the team that could take away a lot of the carries. Sure, they have Cordero Patterson, but they also throw the ball to Cordero Patterson. Plus, Marcus Mariota has a lot of rushing upside himself when compared to a guy like Jacoby Brissett. So, Jacoby Brissett is one of those players that if you wanted to talk yourself into playing him over famous Jameis Winston, then go ahead. But personally, I would rather sit Jacoby Brissett and play Marcus Mariota. Marcus Mariota and this Falcons team have been sneaky good. Now, they're not like a playoff team or something, but they're definitely frisky. They'll be able to stay in this game up against the Cleveland Browns. I think Marcus Mariota ultimately finishes as a top 18 quarterback on the week. Next up, we move to the Buffalo Bills at the Baltimore Ravens in what should be the highest scoring game on the week. This is going to be a back and forth slugfest. I saw on Twitter a video the other day where they fought in a telephone booth. It was like some Russian fighting league where they fought in a fucking telephone booth and were just beating the shit out of each other. There's no way to defend. That's going to be the Buffalo Bills up against the Baltimore Ravens. An absolute slugfest all game long. I expect both Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson to finish inside of the top 3 at the quarterback position this week, and they might be number 1 and number 2. Lamar Jackson is having an MVP level season. Josh Allen didn't play the best up against the Dolphins, but that's because of the Dolphins scheme kind of making them dink and dunk the ball instead of allowing them to go deep to a guy like Diggs or to Gabe Davis. Here up against the Baltimore Ravens defense, I don't think the Baltimore Ravens defense can do that. I don't think they're going to be able to stop the deep ball of Josh Allen. And ultimately, I love this game. I'm very excited to watch this on Sunday. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are must-start players weekly, and especially in this game up against each other. Next up, we got the Washington Commanders at the Dallas Cowboys, and Carson Wentz, you motherfucker. Last week, Carson Wentz in a revenge game up against the Philadelphia Eagles not only shit the bed, but he shit the bed, tried to get up and, not have shit the bed, trying to run away from shitting the bed, but instead he had diarrhea just roll down the sheets all the way into the hallway and leaving a track into the bathroom like he's a snail. It was embarrassing how bad that game was for him, but I talked a lot about last week how I was a little bit nervous about Wentz because while he was on fire, Carson Wentz isn't necessarily the best quarterback ever, and the revenge games haven't gone the way of the quarterbacks thus far this season. Now he gets the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys defense looked tough up against Daniel Jones, but Daniel Jones isn't the sharpest knife in the cupboard, right? Daniel Jones isn't the best quarterback out there. Carson Wentz is definitely more talented than him. So I think Carson Wentz is a start-worthy quarterback, but again, far from ideal. Cooper Rush looked pretty good up against the Giants. I did go and watch that game in real life on Monday Night Football. It was very fun to watch. I'm a Dolphins fan, so I didn't really have a dog in the fight. Cooper Rush looks decent. It is said right now that Dak Prescott, Dakota Prescott, will be back to play next week. We'll see. We'll see. I thought it was very funny that after the game, they show the locker room and none of the players have their shirts off, right? Everyone's just chilling. They're talking. Mike McCarthy's giving a speech or some shit, and Dak's just standing there with his shirt off like the guy thought he was playing in the game or something. Very funny. Cooper Rush is actually a decent real-life quarterback. Just nothing to be excited about in fantasy football. Next up, we got the Seattle Seahawks at the Detroit Lions. Geno Smith looked really good last week. His first 300-plus yard passing attack game as a Seattle Seahawk, so very nice of Geno Smith. But again, do I really want to have my fantasy team relying on Geno Smith? Probably not. Now, the Detroit Lions defense is not the best. This game potentially, if Geno Smith steps up, could be an incredibly high-scoring game. Jared Goff continues to prove week in and week out that he's actually pretty decent. Now, Jared Goff next year will probably end up losing his job. They'll probably end up drafting another quarterback, and that sucks for Jared Goff, but he'll make a decent amount of money being a backup quarterback somewhere, maybe even in Detroit. Jared Goff has played good. Like I said, they have a lot of weapons around Jared Goff. Now, it does suck for Goff to have lost DeAndre Swift because DeAndre Swift is an excellent pass catcher. I've made a lot of talks in the offseason about how DeAndre Swift is kind of comparable to a guy like Alvin Kamara. Excellent rusher inside the tackles, but if you dump the ball off to him, he can do special things. If you remember week number 1, I believe it was, he literally caught the ball in space, fucking fell over, stood up, and ran directly into the end zone. It was amazing. It was one of the funniest plays of the week. Jared Goff definitely is a solid quarterback. It's hard to see like top 5 upside out of Jared Goff because he's a statue in the pocket. He doesn't run the ball, but he is good enough to be a start-worthy quarterback. And Geno Smith, again, you might want to think about starting him, but I just don't think the pendulum has swung far enough towards me wanting to start Geno Smith. Next up, we got the LA Chargers at the Houston Texans. Last week up against the Chicago Bears, Davis Mills chokes in a big way. Now, it's probably always going to be a big way if Davis Mills chokes because his neck is so fucking big. But man, oh man, the Bears should not have won that game at all. That was an awful throw by Davis Mills. I actually like Davis Mills. I give Davis Mills a lot of credit. I actually don't think he's as bad as people say he is, but just because he's not as bad as people say he is doesn't mean that he's a start-worthy quarterback in fantasy football. I know the Chargers defense just got absolutely ass-fucked by the Jacksonville Jaguars on Sunday, but I do think they have a better game here. I ultimately just don't really want to be starting Davis Mills. Justin Herbert, the pervert, yikes. Bad game up against the Jaguars. That Jaguars defense was all over him. Now, Herbert is clearly banged up, so am I incredibly confident in Herbert every single week? No, but I think I should have given more credit to the Jaguars than I did last week. I kind of shit on them. I was like, oh, I don't really think they're all that great of a team. The Jaguars are clearly pretty good. They're definitely better than the Texans, so I think Herbert gets it done in this game. But again, I am not as confident as I would be if Justin Herbert, the pervert, was fully healthy. Next up, we got the Les Titans at the Indianapolis Colts. In this game, I want to sit both quarterbacks. Now, Ryan Tannehill was looking like early on in the season that maybe he was going to lose his job to Malik Willis. Now, I was someone who was a big advocate of Ryan Tannehill in best ball, like on Underdog Fantasy, the sponsor of today's video that we'll talk about in a little bit. I really liked Ryan Tannehill because he was going so late in drafts that it seemed like he was going to be a lock to keep his job, and that even without A.J. Brown, the offense would still be able to move the ball. Ryan Tannehill has some sneaky rushing upside, but the first 2 weeks, things were looking incredibly grim. Things were looking bad news fucking Bears for the Titans. They rip out a win up against the Raiders, who are now 0-3. Big yikes to them. Ryan Tannehill is looking solid, but this matchup, just to me, seems like this is going to be a very boring run-heavy game as long as Jonathan Taylor is able to go. Jonathan Taylor's on the injury report. The first time he's ever missed practice in the NFL. He's been in the NFL for 3 years. This is his 3rd year in the NFL. So that's pretty crazy that he was never even missing a practice. But I think he's going to play. This is going to be a run-heavy game. Matt Ryan, while they beat the Chiefs, they didn't beat the Chiefs because Matt Ryan was slinging the ball all over the fucking yard, right? They won because the Chiefs kind of choked that game away. Ryan Tannehill and Matt Ryan. I think there's going to be matchups where you want to start these guys, but up against each other again. I think this is going to be an incredibly boring game, an absolute fucking snooze fest. Next up, speaking of fucking snooze fest, the Chicago Bears at the New York Football Giants. The Bears, they look good in some spots, right? They're really good at running the ball. They're amazing at running the ball. They could run for 200. There might be 400 yards of fucking rushing in this game between the Bears and the Giants. Both of these teams want to run the rock at a incredibly high rate. Justin Fields, who's the J in his name is in lowercase, but honestly, that might just be fitting because of how bad this guy has been. they don't throw the fucking ball in Chicago, and when they throw the ball, Justin Fields makes a million mistakes. Now, again, I'm not telling you guys that I think Justin Fields is necessarily a bust because it's year number 2, but what I will tell you is that I think if the team believed that Justin Fields was the guy, then Justin Fields would be throwing the ball more than like 7 times a game. Obviously, they don't throw the ball just 7 times a game, but you get the point. Things aren't looking the best for Justin Fields. And when he is given the opportunity, he stinks. Now, could that be because he's not able to get into rhythm because they're running the ball so much? Maybe. Maybe that's the reasoning. But it seems as though the coaching staff there, Matt Eberflus, do not trust Mr. Justin Fields, Daniel Jones, Danny Dimes, Danny Fumbles, Danny Stumbles. The guy's got a million nicknames, and he's not very good. This is probably the last year for Daniel Jones. Brian Daboll is a pretty solid head coach, so they're going to be able to win games, but they're not winning games because Daniel Jones is this fantastic quarterback, this great fantasy football quarterback. They're winning because the defense looks good and Saquon looks good. So Danny Dimes and Justin Fields, leave them on your bench. Next up, we got the revenge game, the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the quarterback revenge games haven't went well, but here we have a coach revenge game, Doug Peterson versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts right now is definitely a start. He's a bona fide stud at the NFL level right now, and it is very funny when Madden comes out and tweets shit about the NFL. It's like, wow, Jalen Hurts looking like the MVP of the league potentially. Now, right now, I would personally have Lamar Jackson as the MVP, but it's not like Jalen Hurts is distantly in second, right? They're right there, neck and neck together. They're like, wow, look how great fucking Jalen Hurts, the MVP leader potentially. We're going to move him from a 76 to a 78. How the fuck is the guy that is leading the league potentially in being the MVP? Most people think Jalen Hurts could be the MVP. How is that motherfucker a 78 in Madden? Now, this video isn't about Madden. This is about fantasy football, but it is almost laughable how out of touch Madden is compared to real life. And it's terrible because kids who don't watch every NFL game, kids who don't watch the NFL, they might just like the Eagles. And they play Madden. They would have no idea that Jalen Hurts is as good as he is because he's not very good in Madden. It's laughable. Jalen Hurts, though, again, back to fantasy football, the guy's amazing. The guy puts up so many numbers. When they bring A.J. Brown in, I talked about this a lot in the offseason, that once they traded for A.J. Brown, I was very confident that that meant that Nick Sirianni and this team wants to throw the ball more. Jalen Hurts has been uncorking passes. He looked great in week 2 in that Monday Night Football game. He looked amazing throwing that deep ball to Quez Watkins. He clearly has it in him. He's an excellent player, and I like him here a ton up against the Jaguars defense. Trevor Lawrence is kind of one of those fringe players where he might be peeking over the fence soon like that dude in Home Improvement, but right now up against the Eagles defense, what really concerns me is the matchup. Eagles defense, to me on paper, looks great. Now, they haven't in real life been just this world-beating defense, but they do look really good. They were great up against Kirk Cousins, but again, Kirk Cousins, we all know, that man chokes on prime time. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be good this year for fantasy, but this just isn't the matchup for him. Next up, we got the New York Jumbo Jets at the Pittsburgh Steelers. But before we could break down this game, I would like to ask that if you guys have ended up enjoying the video thus far, that you please make sure to hit that like button as well as that subscribe button down below. And I do want to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor. They've been on the screen this entire video. Talked about it a little bit earlier. Underdog Fantasy. Are your best ball teams already cooked? Well, head on over to Underdog Fantasy to resurrect them with their Week 6 through Week 17 best ball tournament. The entry fee is only $10 with $500,000 in total prizes and $100,000 going to first place. All you got to do is draft your team. That's it. You don't have to worry about waivers, trades, or in-season management because Underdog will automatically give you your best score at the end of each week of the season. Underdog also offers daily and best ball contests for MLB, NBA, PGA, and NHL, so you can get action all year long, not just during the football season. All you got to do is click on the link in the video description or use promo code Stokastic to get a first match deposit bonus of up to $100. So if you deposit $100, they will give you an additional $100, which is 10 free entries into the Best Ball Resurrection Tournament. If you haven't tried Best Ball yet and you love fantasy football, you're watching this video already, we're like almost 20 minutes in, you probably like fantasy football. It is incredibly fun. I love drafting. Drafting is my favorite part about fantasy football, and now you can even draft into the season. It's already week 4, so that week 6 deadline is closing quickly. Make sure you guys do check that out. And also, if your fantasy teams aren't doing the best, now you can have other teams to root for. And you also don't have to worry about, like I said, setting your lineup or anything because they automatically do it for you at the end of the week, giving you your best lineup. So back on into things, Jets at Steelers. There's not much to say about this game in the quarterback position. Mitch Trubisky might lose his fucking job soon. I thought they were going to bench him for Kenny Pickett this week because they're coming off that Thursday night football game up against the Browns. Mitch Trubisky can't throw it in the middle of the field. He can only throw the ball to one side of the field. Deontay Johnson has been good. Najee Harris is so-so. But besides that, this team is a fucking disaster. Mitch Trubisky could easily win this game, right? Because they're playing up against the Jets. But this game is very uninspiring for the quarterbacks. The MILF hunter, Zach Wilson, is back. I'm going to need to see some solid games out of Zach Wilson. I know he has that upside inside him. He's got that dog in him, right? Because he was fucking his mom's best friend. But does he actually have skill? He's a funny guy. He's a fucking meme. The guy's a meme. Is he going to be good when he actually steps on the field? I'm not sure. I'm worried about, I know I already talked about running backs and receivers. I'm worried, like Breece Hall, is he going to get a million dump offs with Zach Wilson? Probably not. Like, could Garrett Wilson shit the bed because Zach Wilson loves to throw the ball to Elijah Moore? Potentially, but we'll see what happens. Zach Wilson, Mitch Trubisky definitely sits for me. Next up, we got the Arizona Cardinals at the Carolina Panthers. We're going to be firing up the short king Kyler Murray this week up against the Panthers. Kyler Murray and this whole Cardinals offense hasn't been the best. Now, normally we're used to the start of the season with Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray. This team is unbeatable. They are fucking world beaters. If they crowned the Super Bowl champion in week 5 or 6, the Cardinals would have won 7,000 Super Bowls in a row since Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray have been the combo there. But after that, typically things start to fall apart. Things start to wither, and then Kyler Murray doesn't look as good. There's always that Call of Duty narrative, which is funny, but at the end of the day, I don't think that's necessarily true. He gets the Panthers this week. The Panthers defense is decent, but Kyler Murray should have no struggle at all. Absolutely butt-fucking and torching this Panthers defense. I like Kyler Murray a ton, but again, he has been underwhelming compared to where you drafted him, and based upon how good this Cardinals team normally starts, and maybe that's because they don't have D-Hop, and when D-Hop comes back, they're going to look great. Baker Mayfield has been all right for fantasy football. He has been a disaster for DJ Moore. He throws the ball to DJ Moore roughly a zillion times a game. DJ Moore is one of the highest target shares of a wide receiver in the whole National Football League, but the issue is Matt Rule's a bit of an idiot. Baker Mayfield isn't all that good. If Christian McCaffrey doesn't play this week, which is potentially going to happen, which sucks, I don't want to play Baker anyways, but I think that would help out DJ Moore. Next up, we got the New England Deflatriots at the Green Bay Packers. Now, it came out earlier today that Mac Jones isn't ruling out playing on Sunday. What? I was shocked when I read that because it seemed like the motherfucker was going to be out for like 6 to 8 weeks and might miss the entire season. But now he's not even ruling out playing on Sunday. My assumption, based upon how that injury looked, based upon how he looked getting carted off the field when they were carrying him off the field, didn't look great. Bad visual for him. I think Brian Hoyer's going to play. Even if Mac Jones plays, you don't want to play Mac Jones in this game. So Brian Hoyer or Mac Jones. Again, I assume it's Brian Hoyer. You're sitting him down. Aaron Rodgers. This game might, like on paper, right, you think the Packers, when they're playing the Patriots without Mac Jones, they're just going to torch him. But they might just run the ball a lot. So Rodgers is a decent start here, but not a guy that I'm clamoring for this week. Next game, we got the Denver Broncos at the Las Vegas Raiders. Mr. Unlimited, Russell Wilson. More like Mr. fucking Limited, man. This guy hasn't been great besides week 1. Hasn't looked good. The Raiders look awful. So if Russell Wilson was ever to have that big game, that bounce back performance, it would be here. I'm concerned about Russell Wilson. I'm not benching him yet, but we're starting to get to the point where we might want to bench Russell Wilson if he shits the bed here up against the Raiders. Derek Carr, this Raiders team hasn't looked the best. Carr's been decent for fantasy, not necessarily ideal, but this game has the makings of a back-and-forth high-scoring game. The Broncos' defense definitely has not lived up to expectations, so this could be a tit-for-tat, high-scoring, rock'em sock'em robots-esque affair. I really do like both quarterbacks here, but again, I'm worried about both because they both haven't looked the best thus far this season, but I do have them both ranked inside of the top 12. Next up, we got the Kansas City Chiefs at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for Sunday Night Football. Patrick Mahomes is a must-start every week. I know people in the offseason, oh, Nick, Nick, don't you know he lost Tyreek Hill? He's going to be shit. And then we see, look, he still looks good. Now, obviously, there's going to be points in the game where they miss Tyreek Hill because Tyreek Hill is one of the most dynamic wide receivers in the National Football League, maybe the best receiver in the NFL. So obviously, he's going to miss him. But does that mean that Patrick Mahomes was going to shit the bed this year and be outside the top 5 quarterbacks? Of course not. Patrick Mahomes is amazing. The Bucs defense is tough, so I don't expect the best performance out of Patrick Mahomes, but he's definitely startable. Tampa Bay Tom Brady has been in a slump through the first 3 games. He just has not been good. Eventually, when Godwin returns, Evans is now back this week. I think this team is going to mold into one of the best teams in the NFC. I think this team is going to eventually click. Everything's going to click, and they're going to be amazing. Will that be this week up against the Chiefs? I'm not too sure. But what I do know is that Tom Brady is not going to be playing like he played through the first couple of games of the season, and eventually all things are going to click. Again, I don't love Brady this week, but I do think he's going to be just fine. Patrick Mahomes, same thing, but I definitely like Mahomes more than Brady. Final game here. We got Monday Night Football, the LA Rams at the San Francisco 49ers. Jimmy Guap, Jimmy G-Spot, Jimmy Pornstar looked atrocious in that Monday night or Sunday night football game. I think it was up against the Denver Broncos. He just looked bad. And there's nothing to say about that. He even said these play calls suck, basically, from Shanahan during the game, if you read his lips. I love reading Jimmy G's lips. They're so luscious. But with that said, Jimmy Garoppolo up against the Rams defense. I know the Rams defense hasn't been what they were last year, but they still have pretty solid players. They've got Aaron Donald, who will run a motherfucker over and eat you alive, Jeffrey Dahmer. So we're going to go ahead here and say that Jimmy Guap's going to be a sit. Matthew Stafford, Matthew Snapback, hasn't been, again, amazing. Still one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL in my mind. I hope this game isn't a snooze fest, though, because all these primetime games haven't really been the best. And the Niners defense is good. The Rams defense is good. This might be a lower scoring game, but I definitely believe Matthew Stafford, even in a tougher game, could still put up a decent enough performance to be start worthy in fantasy football. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, please make sure to hit that like button as well as that subscribe button down below. It would help me out a ton. If you do want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY and ask any questions down below in the comment section if you have any. I love you guys all so much. I hope you have a great guys' day. And as always, good boy.